The rescue vessel Orion 7 drifted over a shattered starship. Its only beacon, a faint bleat of life, too weak to ignore. As pilot Jack Renner descended into the wreckage, he saw a tiny alien girl pressed against a broken viewport, her chest heaving for a last breath. He didn't hesitate. He ripped off his own mask and pressed it to her face, sparking a desperate chase that would change both their fates. The Orion 7 hung motionless in the vast emptiness of uncharted space. Jack Renner stood at the command console, his fingers tracing the trajectory of the distress signal that had led them here. His vessel was small by rescue standards, a repurposed military scout ship now stripped of weapons and rebuilt for search and extraction missions. Through the main viewport, the wreckage of the alien vessel spun slowly, glittering like broken glass in the light of a distant sun. "Last sweep, then we're gone," Jack said to no one in particular. The ship's automated systems acknowledged with a soft beep. Standard protocol was clear: 3 passes for life signs, then mark the wreck for salvage teams and move on. 2 passes had yielded nothing but silence. The third scan started, and Jack prepared the departure coordinates. There were 3 more distress beacons awaiting investigation in this sector alone. Each moment spent on a dead ship was potentially a life lost elsewhere. Jack knew this math all too well. But then the console pinged, a single, faint life sign. Jack froze, his hand hovering over the navigation panel. The signal pulsed weakly on the screen, almost imperceptible against the background radiation. He magnified the scan. Deep within the wreckage, something was still breathing. Or someone. Memories washed over him. The Tarsus mining accident where he'd arrived 3 hours too late. The colonial outpost where the oxygen had run out just as Orion 7 broke atmosphere. The faces of those he couldn't save visited him in dreams. Jack's jaw tightened. "Cancel departure sequence," he ordered. The computer chirped in acknowledgement. Jack stood and crossed to the equipment locker, pulling out his EVA suit with practiced efficiency. It was rated for 12 hours of life support in hard vacuum, reinforced against micro-debris and temperature extremes. The helmet sealed with a satisfying click. "Computer, establish continuous monitoring of the life sign. Alert me to any changes in status." The ship confirmed his command as he made final suit checks. The airlock cycled, and Jack emerged onto the ship's hull. Between him and the wreckage lay 200 meters of empty space. He activated his propulsion pack and pushed off, crossing the void with careful bursts from his maneuvering thrusters. The alien vessel grew larger as he approached. It had once been beautiful, a sleek design with flowing, organic lines that suggested advanced technology. Now it was split open like a broken shell. Hull fragments drifted in a cloud around the main structure. Some sections still glowed with residual heat from whatever catastrophe had befallen the ship. Jack's helmet display marked the entry point, a maintenance airlock on what appeared to be the ship's starboard side. As he drew closer, he noted scorch marks surrounding the airlock. Not random damage from the disaster, but precision burns consistent with weapons fire. This hadn't been an accident. The ship had been attacked. Jack's hand moved instinctively to where his sidearm would have been in his military days. He carried only repair tools now. He pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. 1 life sign, 1 survivor. That was all that mattered. The airlock was partially functional. After some coaxing with his portable power cell, Jack managed to cycle it enough to slip inside. The inner door opened onto darkness. Emergency lighting flickered weakly along the floor, casting long shadows that danced with each pulse. "If there's breath, we must try," Jack whispered his personal mantra, the words fogging slightly inside his helmet. It was a promise he'd made to himself after Tarsus, a line he would not cross again. The corridor before him showed signs of a desperate evacuation. Personal effects lay scattered across the deck. Small bags. What might have been toys or tools. Items dropped in haste. and then the first bodies. They were not human. That much was immediately clear. Slight frames with elongated limbs, bluish-white skin that would have luminesced in life, but now lay dull in death. Their faces were almost childlike, with oversized, now darkened eyes. Civilian clothing, no weapons. Jack counted 6 in this corridor alone. His helmet sensors analyzed the atmosphere. Near vacuum conditions. Traces of what might have been their equivalent of oxygen. Temperature hovering just above freezing. No detectable pathogens or toxins. But the air was unbreathable for either species. Jack stepped carefully around the bodies and pressed deeper into the ship. His suit's external lights cut through the darkness, revealing more corridors and compartments. The internal structure reminded him of a honeycomb, interconnected chambers rather than the linear design of human vessels. The life sign beacon on his HUD grew slightly stronger. He was moving in the right direction. A bulkhead ahead had been sealed and then partially breached. Beyond it, Jack could see evidence of a last stand. What might have been makeshift barricades had been constructed from furniture and equipment. More bodies here, some clutching improvised weapons. They had tried to defend this section. Jack squeezed through the breach and found himself in what appeared to be a residential area. The chambers here were smaller, more personalized. Family quarters, perhaps. The damage was less severe, suggesting this section had been somewhat protected by the bulkheads. His sensor pinged urgently. The life sign was close now, just beyond a sealed door at the end of the corridor. The door's control panel was dark. Jack pulled out his toolkit and connected a bypass circuit. After a tense minute of rerouting power, the panel flickered to life. Alien symbols scrolled across its surface, but the universal language of red and green indicators told him what he needed to know. The chamber beyond was sealed, but losing pressure. Whatever atmosphere remained would be gone within minutes. Jack overrode the safety protocols and the door slid open with a hiss of escaping air. Emergency lights cast the room in a dim red glow. It appeared to be a children's quarters, small sleeping platforms, walls decorated with what might have been the alien equivalent of pictures or posters. In the center of the room stood a small pressure pod, a last resort emergency shelter. Its transparent upper section revealed a tiny figure inside. A child, no older than 7 by human standards, huddled within. She clutched what looked like an oxygen mask, but the attached tank lay broken beside her. Her chest rose and fell in rapid, desperate movements. She was suffocating. The pod's integrity had been compromised. A hairline fracture along one seam was allowing the precious atmosphere to escape. Jack knelt beside it, running a diagnostic. The pod had emergency seals that could be activated, but they needed power. His suit's auxiliary supply might be enough, but it would take time to connect and configure. Time the child didn't have. The tiny alien's eyes locked with his through the pod's transparent shell and through his helmet visor. Her eyes glowed faintly, a dim blue reminiscent of Earth's oceans. Jack saw recognition in them, understanding, and then resignation. She believed she was going to die. "No," Jack said aloud, though she couldn't possibly hear him. "Not today." He made a split-second decision. With practiced movements, he activated his suit's emergency protocols, detaching his helmet with a sharp twist. The bitter cold of near vacuum hit him immediately, along with the pressure drop that made his ears pop painfully. Jack held his breath as he pulled the helmet free. Working swiftly, he unsealed the emergency access port on the pod and pushed his helmet inside. The girl recoiled in fear, but Jack gently fitted the helmet over her head. It was far too large, but the neck seal could be tightened to create an airtight connection with her smaller body. His suit's life support system would continue to function for the helmet, independent of the rest of the suit. Jack's lungs began to burn. Bright spots danced in his vision. The pressure differential made his skin feel tight, and he could feel the moisture on his eyes and in his mouth beginning to evaporate. He would have perhaps 15 seconds of useful consciousness. With the last of his coordinated movement, Jack connected his suit's portable power supply to the pod's emergency systems. The pod's own helmet, sized for the alien child, lay nearby. If he could power up the pod, seal the leak, and get that helmet working. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. Jack fumbled with the connections, his movements becoming clumsy. The alien child watched him, her expression changing from fear to confusion. She reached out one tiny hand and pressed it against the inside of his helmet, now on her head. The pod systems came online with a flicker of light. Jack's fingers, numb and uncooperative, found the emergency seal control. The fracture in the pod sealed itself with a layer of fast-hardening resin. 10 seconds of consciousness left, perhaps less. The pod's internal atmosphere began to stabilize. Jack disconnected his helmet's feed and located the pod's backup oxygen supply, a small, redundant tank built into the base. With the last of his strength, he activated it and connected it to the mask the child had been clutching. Blackness crowded his vision now. His lungs screamed for air. Jack pulled his helmet off the child and quickly replaced it with the pod's properly sized one, now connected to the functioning backup supply. As consciousness slipped away, Jack saw the child's eyes widen, not with fear this time, but with wonder. She was breathing normally again. She would live. Jack's last thought before the darkness took him was simple satisfaction. Not this time. Not on my watch. The alien child stared at the unconscious human floating beside her pod. She had seen the others of her kind fall one by one as the air thinned, as the cold crept in. She had watched her mother seal her into the last functioning emergency pod, had felt her mother's last touch against the transparent shell before she collapsed. For hours, she had been alone with the dead, and then this strange creature had appeared, enclosed in its own protective shell, lights shining from its head, and it had given her breath. She didn't understand why. She didn't understand what manner of being would sacrifice itself for her. But as she watched the human's face growing pale, his lips taking on a bluish tint that matched her own skin, she knew she had to help him. The pod's controls were simple enough for a child to use in an emergency. Her small fingers worked quickly, activating the pod's external manipulators, mechanical arms designed to retrieve objects outside the pod's shell. With careful movements, she guided them to grasp the human suit and pull him closer to the pod. There was an emergency resuscitation kit built into the pod's base, standard on all civilian vessels of her people. It contained a universal respirator designed to adapt to different physiologies. The manipulator arms extracted it and positioned it over the human's face. She didn't know if it would work on his kind. She didn't know if he was already beyond saving, but she had to try. The universal respirator adhered to the human's face. Its sensors analyzed his physiology in seconds, then began to pump a controlled mixture of gases into his lungs. The human's chest rose and fell mechanically at first. The child watched anxiously, her small hands pressed against the pod's shell. "Please wake up," she thought. "Please don't die for me." Jack's awareness returned slowly. First came the sensation of something covering his mouth and nose, then the feeling of air, blessed air, flowing into his lungs. His chest hurt as though he'd been kicked by a gravitational boot. His eyes felt gritty, his lips cracked and painful. But he was alive. His vision cleared gradually. He was floating just outside the pressure pod, tethered to it by mechanical arms. A breathing apparatus was sealed to his face, connected to the pod systems. Inside the transparent shell, the alien child watched him with glowing eyes. She had saved him. Jack's dry lips cracked into a smile behind the respirator. The child mimicked the expression, her small mouth curving upward in what seemed to be a universal gesture. Communication would be a challenge, but survival was the immediate priority. Jack assessed his situation with military precision. His EVA suit was intact apart from the helmet, which was now inside the pod with the child. The suit's internal supply of emergency breathing masks had been depleted on a previous mission. The pod's respirator was keeping him alive, but he couldn't remain tethered to it indefinitely. They needed to find a more sustainable solution, and quickly. The ship's structural integrity was questionable at best, and whatever, or whoever, had attacked it might return. Jack pointed to himself and said clearly, "Jack." Then he pointed to the child questioningly. The alien child hesitated, then placed a small hand against her chest. "Eli," she said, the sound barely audible through the pod's shell and his respirator. "Eli," Jack repeated with a nod. "A good start." He gestured to the corridor beyond, then made a walking motion with his fingers. They needed to move. The child, Eli, nodded in understanding. Jack carefully detached the respirator, holding his breath. He couldn't communicate while wearing it, and he needed to give instructions. With quick, deliberate movements, he signed to Eli to release the mechanical arms, holding him. When she complied, he pushed himself toward the door, then turned and beckoned her to follow in the pod. The pod had emergency propulsion, small jets designed for precisely this scenario. Eli activated them, and the pod lifted slightly off the deck, hovering a few centimeters above the floor. Good. They could move. Jack took one last deep breath from the respirator, then gestured for Eli to follow him. He pushed off down the corridor, the pod drifting behind him like a luminous bubble. His lungs burned anew with each passing second, but he forced himself to move steadily. Panic would only consume oxygen faster. They passed through the residential section and back toward the bulkhead breach. Jack's vision began to dim again as oxygen deprivation set in. He paused to take another breath from the pod's respirator before continuing. Beyond the bulkhead lay their objective: the ship's storage lockers. Standard spacecraft design dictated emergency supplies would be distributed throughout the vessel. If they were lucky, they would find breathing equipment compatible with Jack's suit. The storage section had suffered less damage than the residential areas. Jack quickly located what appeared to be a maintenance locker. The alien writing was incomprehensible, but the universal symbol for atmosphere, a stylized representation of gas molecules, was recognizable. With oxygen-starved fingers, Jack pried open the locker. Inside lay a treasure trove: emergency breathing apparatuses, atmosphere regulation equipment, and repair tools. The alien technology was different from human designs, but the principles were the same. Jack found what appeared to be a compact emergency rebreather. The facepiece was designed for the alien's smaller features, but the oxygen mixture would be compatible with human physiology. He fitted it to his face with clumsy movements. The seal wasn't perfect, but it would do. Air flowed into his lungs. It had a slightly sweet taste, but it was breathable. Jack's head cleared as oxygen reached his brain. Now they could focus on a more permanent solution. Jack examined the remaining equipment. There were several full-sized breathing masks and portable tanks. He found one designed for a smaller body, perhaps for the alien children, and held it up for Eli to see. The pod's atmosphere would eventually run out. They needed to transfer Eli to a more mobile solution. Jack pointed to the mask, then to Eli, and made a walking motion with his fingers. Eli seemed to understand, nodding inside the pod. Step by step, Jack demonstrated what they would do. He would connect the mask to the tank, unseal just enough of the pod to slip the mask inside, and Eli would need to put it on immediately. Then, they would fully open the pod. There would be a moment of exposure to vacuum, but it would be brief. Eli watched his pantomime with solemn attention. When he finished, she nodded again. Her trust in him was absolute. Jack felt the weight of that trust like a physical presence. He prepared everything carefully, double-checking each connection. The tank was full, the mask properly sized. He positioned himself beside the pod's emergency access port, the same one he'd used to place his helmet inside earlier. Jack held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. He unsealed the port. In one smooth motion, he slipped the mask inside. Eli grabbed it and fitted it over her face with practiced ease. Clearly, not her first experience with emergency equipment. Jack sealed the port again and checked that the mask was working properly. Eli gave him a thumbs up, a gesture she must have learned from watching him. Now, for the risky part. Jack activated the pod's full release sequence. The transparent shell retracted with a hiss of equalizing pressure. For a brief moment, Eli was exposed to the vacuum. Her skin paled slightly, but the mask held. She was breathing. Jack quickly connected a tether between his suit and Eli's waist, a safety precaution in the microgravity environment. The alien child floated up from the pod, her small form drifting until the tether went taut. Jack gently pulled her closer, securing her to his side. They had survived the first crisis, but they were still aboard a severely damaged ship in uncharted space, with limited supplies and no immediate rescue prospects. Jack's suit communicator could not establish a connection with Orion 7. Too much interference from the wreckage. They would need to move to an external access point or find the alien vessel's communication system. He pointed toward what he believed was the ship's bridge, raising an eyebrow in question. Eli nodded and pointed in the same direction, confirming his guess. The child clearly understood the ship's layout. Together, they moved through the honeycomb corridors, Jack pushing off walls with practiced skill, Eli floating alongside him. The tether between them remained taut enough to guide her, but loose enough to allow movement. In the near-zero gravity, her slight frame made her as light as a feather. They passed more evidence of the attack, scorch marks consistent with energy weapons, sections of hull torn open from the inside out. More bodies. Jack tried to shield Eli from the worst sights, but the child's eyes missed nothing. Her people, her family, lay dead around them. Yet she showed remarkable composure, focusing on the path ahead. As they approached what appeared to be a command center, Jack's suit sensors detected an anomaly, a heat signature where there should be none, something warm in the cold vacuum of the dead ship. He stopped, holding up a hand to signal Eli to do the same. The heat source was moving, and it was large. A survivor, or one of the attackers, left behind to eliminate any remaining crew? Jack wished fervently for his old military sidearm. Instead, he had only a multi-tool and a repair laser that could, at best, cause minor burns. He pulled Eli close, whispering through his rebreather, "Stay behind me." Whether she understood his words or merely his tone, Eli nodded and positioned herself in his shadow. The heat source moved again, closer now. It was approaching from a side corridor just ahead. Jack braced himself against a bulkhead, ready to push off in any direction for a quick escape. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was massive, nearly twice Jack's height, and composed of both organic and mechanical parts. A cyborg, with a metal lower body and a partially organic torso and head. One eye glowed red. The other appeared natural but clouded, where a right arm should have been, a serrated blade extended. Not a survivor, a pirate. Specifically, a cyborg raider. Humans or aliens who had replaced so much of themselves with technology that their original species was often indistinguishable. They preyed on vulnerable ships in the outer reaches where patrols were few. The cyborg's red eye swept the corridor. When it landed on Jack and Eli, the mechanical parts whirred as it oriented itself toward them. The blade arm raised. Jack didn't wait for it to attack. He pushed off from the bulkhead, propelling himself and Eli back the way they had come. In the microgravity, the movement was swift and disorienting. The cyborg launched itself in pursuit, servos whining as it accelerated. Despite its bulk, the cyborg moved with surprising speed in zero-G. Jack darted through a narrow accessway, hoping the larger figure would struggle to follow. The gambit bought them seconds at best. The cyborg simply tore through the surrounding panel with its blade arm. They needed a plan. The The storage locker had contained equipment but no weapons. The alien ship might have defensive capabilities, but without knowledge of their systems or time to figure them out, such options were useless. Jack's mind raced as they fled. The cyborg was gaining. Its mechanical legs pushed it forward with cold efficiency, while Jack's movements were hampered by the need to protect Eli. They rounded a corner and found themselves in what appeared to be an engineering bay. Massive conduits ran along the walls and ceiling, connecting to a central column that pulsed with residual energy. The ship's power core, damaged but not completely dead. Coolant fluid had leaked from ruptured pipes, forming globules that drifted through the air like strange, viscous jellyfish. Sparks arced occasionally from exposed circuitry. Jack spotted a partially open access panel near the base of the power core. It might be large enough for them to squeeze through, but certainly too small for the cyborg. He changed direction, pushing toward the panel. Behind them, the heavy footfalls of the cyborg echoed through the metal deck plates. Thump, 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 each impact driving it closer. As they approached the access panel, Eli suddenly pulled against the tether. Jack turned to find her pointing urgently at one of the larger coolant tanks mounted on the wall. The tank was cracked, coolant seeping out in a slow, viscous stream. Jack didn't understand until Eli mimed an explosion with her hands. The coolant was reactive, possibly flammable or explosive when exposed to certain conditions. He nodded in understanding. A diversion. Jack quickly unspooled additional length on the tether, allowing Eli to drift toward a section of detached pipe floating nearby. The alien child grabbed it and, with surprising strength, hurled it toward a control panel adjacent to the damaged coolant tank. The pipe struck with precision, smashing into the panel. Sparks erupted, igniting the escaping coolant. A brilliant blue flame burst outward, followed by a concussive wave that sent both Jack and Eli tumbling backward. The cyborg, just entering the engineering bay, took the brunt of the explosion. Blue fire engulfed its upper body, and its mechanical system sparked and sputtered. It flailed, momentarily blinded and disoriented. Jack seized the opportunity. He pulled Eli toward the access panel and helped her squeeze through the narrow opening. He followed immediately after, barely fitting his broader shoulders through the gap. They emerged into a narrow maintenance shaft that ran parallel to the main power conduits. The passageway was dim, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. It extended in both directions, curving gradually with the ship's hull. Jack glanced back through the access panel. The cyborg had recovered and was now scanning the engineering bay, its red eye sweeping methodically across the room. It paused at the access panel, but seemed to dismiss it as too small for human passage. A mistake in their favor. They weren't safe yet. The cyborg would eventually realize where they had gone and find another route to intercept them. They needed to keep moving. Jack checked his suit's oxygen levels. The alien rebreather was functioning, but inefficiently. He had perhaps 30 minutes of breathable air remaining. Eli's tank appeared to be at approximately half capacity. Neither would last indefinitely. As they moved along the maintenance shaft, Jack noticed a change in the ambient light. Ahead, a soft blue glow emanated from a junction in the passageway. He approached cautiously, Eli floating silently beside him. The junction opened into a small chamber, filled with what appeared to be cryogenic suspension pods. Most had been damaged beyond repair, their transparent covers shattered, their occupants long dead. But one pod at the far end of the chamber remained intact. Its systems still functioned, running on emergency power. Inside, a figure floated in suspended animation. Another child, slightly older than Eli, with the same bluish-white skin and delicate features. The pod's status display pulsed with alien symbols, but the universal color code suggested the system was failing. The power supply was nearly depleted. Eli's reaction was immediate and visceral. She pressed against the intact pod, her small hands splayed against the transparent surface. She looked at Jack with pleading eyes, then pointed to the pod and back to herself several times. Jack understood. Family. This was someone important to Eli, a sister perhaps, or a close friend. The cryogenic pod was dying. Without intervention, its occupant would die with it. But reactivating or moving a cryopod was delicate work under ideal conditions. Here, in a damaged ship with limited tools and a hostile cyborg hunting them, it bordered on impossible. Yet Jack couldn't ignore the plea in Eli's eyes. He had come to save lives, and here was another life that could be saved. He examined the pod systems quickly. It was similar in design to human cryotechnology, though more advanced in some respects. The main issue was power. The pod's internal battery was failing after running on emergency mode for too long. Jack's EVA suit had its own power supply, smaller than ideal, but possibly sufficient to stabilize the pod until they could find a better solution. The connections would need to be adapted, but his toolkit contained the necessary components. As he worked, Jack kept one eye on the maintenance shaft entrance. The cyborg would be searching for them, methodically eliminating possible hiding places. Time was not on their side. Eli hovered anxiously nearby, occasionally touching the pod as if to reassure its occupant. Jack worked as quickly as precision would allow, splicing wires and reconfiguring connections. The pod systems recognized the new power source. Status indicators shifted from critical red to cautionary yellow. The occupant remained safely suspended, but the pod was still in a precarious state. It needed more power for full functionality. Jack accessed the pod's control interface. With Eli's guidance, the child pointing to specific symbols that she recognized, he managed to initiate a transfer sequence. The pod's essential systems would remain active, while non-critical functions powered down, extending the operational window. A loud clang echoed through the maintenance shaft. The cyborg had found their trail. Jack quickly detached the pod from its mounting brackets. In the microgravity environment, the pod now floated freely, tethered to Jack's suit alongside Eli. It was unwieldy. The mass was significant even in 0G, but manageable if they moved carefully. They needed to find an escape route, perhaps a shuttle bay or an emergency evacuation point. Jack looked to Eli questioningly, pointing in various directions. Eli seemed to understand. She pointed decisively toward a different branch of the maintenance shaft. Jack nodded and began moving in that direction, pulling the cryopod alongside them. The maintenance shaft narrowed as they progressed, making maneuvering the pod increasingly difficult. Behind them, the rhythmic thumping of the cyborg's approach grew louder. The cramped space would slow the cyborg down, but not stop it entirely. They emerged into what appeared to be a small auxiliary control room. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim blue glow. Control panels lined the walls, most dark and unresponsive. A large viewport dominated one wall, showing the starfield beyond and, in the distance, the reassuring shape of Orion 7. Jack quickly assessed their options. The control room had no other exits except the maintenance shaft they had just traversed. They were cornered. But the room's purpose gave him an idea. This might be an emergency command station, a backup bridge designed to maintain critical functions if the main bridge was compromised. Such stations typically included communication equipment. Jack scanned the alien controls, looking for anything resembling a communications array. The designs were unfamiliar, but certain patterns were universal. A dish-shaped icon on one panel caught his attention. He activated the panel. To his relief, it powered up, its symbols glowing with faint blue light. Jack couldn't read the alien language, but he recognized a transmission frequency selector. He quickly set it to broadcast on the standard emergency channel used throughout known space. With Eli's help, translating through gestures and pointing, Jack managed to record a simple distress message: their location, the presence of survivors, the hostile cyborg. The message would repeat automatically, broadcasting to any vessel within range. including Orion 7. As the message began to transmit, the cyborg's approach became unmistakable. Heavy impacts shook the maintenance shaft, drawing inexorably closer. The blade arm appeared first, slicing through a section of the shaft that had proven too narrow. The cyborg forced its way through the opening, metal shrieking against metal. Jack positioned himself between the cyborg and the children. He had no weapons, no tactical advantage, only the absolute certainty that he would not let this mechanical monstrosity harm those he had sworn to protect. The cyborg advanced into the control room, its red eye fixing on them with cold precision. It raised its blade arm, servos whining as it prepared to strike. Jack glanced around desperately for anything he could use as a weapon. A broken section of conduit floated nearby. He grabbed it, a makeshift staff at best, laughably inadequate against the cyborg's reinforced frame, but better than nothing. The cyborg lunged forward. Jack swung the conduit, deflecting the blade arm just enough to avoid being impaled. The force of the impact sent him spinning in the zero-G environment. He used the movement, pushing off a control panel to launch himself at the cyborg's head. The surprise maneuver caught the cyborg off guard. Jack slammed the conduit into its organic eye with all his strength. The cyborg reeled backward, a strange mechanical howl emanating from what remained of its vocal apparatus. Jack knew he had bought them seconds at most. The cyborg would recover quickly, and he had just expended his only surprise advantage. Behind him, Eli was working frantically at one of the control panels. Jack couldn't understand what she was attempting, but her movements suggested purpose rather than panic. The cyborg regained its balance, its mechanical eye now burning with a brighter red intensity. Its organic eye was damaged, leaking a thick, dark fluid. It advanced again, more cautiously this time, the blade arm held defensively. Jack backed away, keeping himself between the cyborg and the children. His rebreather was failing. Each breath came with greater effort than the last. The makeshift staff felt heavier in his hands. He was reaching his physical limits. The cyborg seemed to sense this. It waited, letting Jack's strength ebb with each labored breath. A cold, calculating strategy. Suddenly, the cyborg paused, its head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only it could hear. The red eye flickered, and for a moment, the blade arm lowered. "You saved the princess." The voice was a grotesque amalgamation of mechanical synthesis and organic vocal cords. It spoke in broken standard, the common language of human space. Jack blinked in confusion. Princess? He glanced back at the cryopod. The sleeping child inside. Was she royalty among her people? The cyborg's next words confirmed his suspicion. Kira, Royal House, Bounty. Understanding dawned. The attack hadn't been random. The ship had been targeted specifically because it carried someone valuable, someone worth a substantial reward. The sleeping child in the cryopod was Kira, apparently a princess of her species. And Eli, perhaps her sister or companion. The cyborg continued, its voice becoming more organic, less mechanical. I was her guard. Before. The implants. Before. The programming. The revelation hit Jack like a physical blow. The cyborg had once been a protector, not a hunter. Its original organic component, whatever species it had once been, had served as Kira's security. But someone had captured it, converted it into a cyborg, reprogrammed it to hunt down the very people it had once sworn to protect. A flicker of the former guard remained, fighting against the mechanical imperatives that drove it. The cyborg's internal conflict was visible in its movements, jerky, uncertain, the blade arm rising and falling as competing directives warred within its hybrid brain. Jack watched cautiously, unwilling to trust this apparent breakdown, but unable to press an attack. His strength was failing rapidly. If the cyborg resumed its assault, he would not be able to stop it. Behind him, Eli had finished whatever she was doing at the control panel. A deep hum resonated through the deck plates as systems long dormant began to power up. The cyborg noticed too. Its head swiveled toward the control panel, then back to the cryopod. Recognition seemed to dawn in its remaining organic eye. "Stasis. Failing," it said. "She will die." To Jack's astonishment, the cyborg moved, not toward them, but toward a power relay station on the far wall. With deliberate movements, it extended its blade arm and drove it into the relay's central circuit. Energy arced through the cyborg's body. It convulsed, but held firm, becoming a living conduit. Power flowed from the relay, through the cyborg, and into the ship's emergency systems, including the cryopod. The pod's status indicators shifted from yellow to green. Full power restored, Kira would survive. The cyborg turned its head toward Jack one last time. "Protect, Princess," it said, its voice fading as its systems overloaded. "Fulfill my oath." With a final surge of electricity, the cyborg collapsed, its mechanical eye darkening, its organic eye closing for the last time. The blade arm, still embedded in the power relay, continued to conduct energy to the ship's critical systems. In death, the cyborg had found redemption, returning to its original purpose as Kira's protector. Jack stared at the fallen cyborg, a complex mixture of emotions washing over him. The enemy had become an ally in the final moments, sacrificing itself to save the child it had been programmed to hunt. Eli approached the cyborg cautiously. She placed one small hand on its partially organic head in what seemed to be a gesture of forgiveness, or perhaps gratitude. Then she returned to the cryopod, checking that her sister, if that's what Kira was, remained safely suspended. Jack's suit communicator crackled to life. The distress signal had reached Orion 7. His ship's AI was acknowledging receipt and initiating rescue protocols. Help was coming. But Jack's rebreather was failing completely now. Each breath yielded less oxygen than the one before. Dark spots danced at the edges of his vision. He had pushed himself beyond human endurance, and his body was demanding payment. He checked Eli's oxygen tank, still at quarter capacity, enough to sustain her until rescue arrived. Kira was secure in her cryopod, now fully powered. Both children would survive. Jack removed his jacket, standard emergency procedure for treating shock victims. He draped it carefully over Kira's pod, an instinctively protective gesture. Then, he looked at Eli and managed a reassuring smile. "They're coming," he whispered through the failing rebreather. "You'll be safe now." Eli seemed to understand. She nodded solemnly, her glowing eyes fixed on his face, as if memorizing every feature. Jack pushed himself toward the viewport. Through it, he could see Orion 7 growing larger. The rescue ship was approaching rapidly, its running lights cutting through the darkness of space. His vision tunneled. Consciousness began to slip away. Jack's last clear thought was satisfaction. He had not failed this time. The cycle of 2 late arrivals was broken. 2 lives had been saved. He didn't feel himself drifting. Didn't feel Eli's small hands attempting to steady him as he floated weightlessly in the control room. Didn't hear the rescue shuttle docking, or the shouts of the recovery team as they breached the alien vessel's hull. Darkness claimed him completely. The rescue shuttle Resolute slammed its docking clamp onto the derelict hull with practiced precision. Combat-armored soldiers spilled out first, weapons raised against potential threats. The medical team followed, equipment at the ready. "Life signs detected in Section 4, the team leader announced. 2 alien signatures, 1 human. Human vitals are critical." They moved through the honeycomb corridors with practiced efficiency, following the signal from Jack's suit. Auto turrets on the wreck, dormant until now, suddenly activated, firing energy pulses at the rescue team. The soldiers returned fire, systematically destroying the defensive weapons. Ryan, a rookie medic on his first deep space rescue, kept close to the center of the formation. His hands clutched a portable stabilization unit, eyes scanning constantly for threats. The ship was unlike any he had seen before. Organic curves instead of utilitarian angles. Strange symbols instead of standard markings. They reached the auxiliary control room in minutes, breaching the sealed door with a focused cutting beam. Inside, they found an unexpected tableau, a deactivated cyborg, its blade arm embedded in a power relay, a cryopod containing a suspended alien child, a small alien girl hovering protectively near a drifting human form. Jack Renair floated near the viewport, his face pale, lips blue from oxygen deprivation. A jacket, his own, was draped over the cryopod, a final protective gesture before consciousness had failed him. Ryan rushed forward, medical training overriding his shock at the scene. He quickly assessed Jack's condition: severe hypoxia, early stages of decompression sickness, core temperature dropping. The alien rebreather had failed completely. Working swiftly, Ryan injected a stabilizing stimulant directly into Jack's carotid artery. The effect was immediate. Jack's body convulsed as the drug forced his systems back to minimal functionality. Ryan attached a proper oxygen mask and began the recompression sequence. Jack's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "The children," he gasped. "Save the children." "They're secure," Ryan assured him, though he wasn't entirely certain what was happening. The alien girl, clearly conscious and mobile, seemed stable. The other child in the cryopod showed normal life signs for suspended animation. The team leader organized the evacuation swiftly. The cryopod was detached from the ship's systems and secured for transport. The alien girl initially resisted when soldiers approached, positioning herself between them and Jack's semi-conscious form. Ryan recognized her protective stance. "She's guarding him," he realized aloud. He saved her, and now she's protecting him. With gentle coaxing and universal gestures of reassurance, they convinced the alien child to board the shuttle alongside Jack's stretcher. She refused to release his hand during the transfer. As the rescue shuttle detached from the derelict vessel, the alien ship's structural integrity finally failed completely. Explosive decompression tore through the weakened sections, and the vessel broke apart in a silent, spectacular display of destruction. The shuttle accelerated away, carrying its precious cargo back to Orion 7 in safety. In the Resolute's medical bay, Jack drifted in and out of consciousness. Proper medical treatment had stabilized his condition, but full recovery would take time. Oxygen deprivation had taken its toll, as had the physical exertion of the rescue operation. When he finally regained full awareness, the first thing he saw was Eli, the alien girl, sitting beside his medical pod. She was wrapped in thermal blankets, an oxygen mask modified for her physiology covering the lower portion of her face. Her glowing eyes brightened visibly when she noticed he was awake. "Hey there," Jack managed, his voice hoarse. "You made it." Eli nodded enthusiastically. She pointed to herself, then to Jack, and back to herself. Then she spoke a single word in heavily accented standard. "Friend." Jack felt a lump form in his throat. "Yes," he agreed. "Friends." A medical officer approached, checking Jack's vitals. "The other one's waking up," he informed Jack. "The cryosuspension is being systematically reversed. Thought you'd want to know." Jack pushed himself upright, ignoring the protest from his aching muscles. "I want to be there." The medical officer hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes, no more. With assistance. Jack made his way to the adjacent medical chamber, where Kira's cryopod had been installed. Technicians monitored the revival process carefully, adjusting parameters as needed for the alien physiology. The pod's transparent cover had been removed. Inside, the older alien child, Kira, lay on a medical platform, her chest rising and falling with natural breaths for the first time in what might have been weeks or months. Her eyes remained closed, but her fingers twitched occasionally. Jack positioned himself at the bedside, Eli hovering anxiously beside him. They watched in silence as Kira gradually returned to consciousness. When her eyes finally opened, the same glowing blue as Eli's, they were filled with confusion and fear. She looked around wildly, not recognizing her surroundings or the strange beings attending her. Jack knelt beside the platform, bringing himself to eye level with the frightened child. "You're safe now," he said softly, knowing she wouldn't understand his words but hoping his tone would convey the message. Eli darted forward, embracing her sister with obvious relief and joy. The two alien children clung to each other, a whispered exchange in their native language passing between them. Kira's eyes met Jack's over her sister's shoulder. There was wariness there, but also the beginning of trust. Eli had obviously communicated something positive about him. Jack smiled gently. "Welcome back," he said. 3 months later, on a lush Earth outpost world, designated Haven, Jack stood in a sunlit courtyard. The colony was one of humanity's more successful terraforming projects, a perfect blend of Earth vegetation and compatible native flora. The air was clean, the gravity comfortable, the society peaceful. In the shade of a large tree with purple-tinged leaves, Eli and Kira played. They had adapted remarkably well to their new environment. Language training had progressed swiftly. Both children now spoke basic standard, with increasing fluency. Their natural luminescence had brightened in response to improved health and nutrition. Kira, as Jack had learned, was indeed royalty, a princess of a species called the Luminary. Their homeworld had been destroyed in a civil war, and the ship Jack had found was one of several asylum vessels carrying survivors to neutral territory. Most had been hunted down by bounty hunters and pirates, seeking rewards from the faction that had prevailed in the conflict. Eli was not Kira's sister by birth, but her appointed companion, and, in their culture, considered family nonetheless. The bond between them was as strong as any biological connection. Captain Reyes of the Interstellar Refugee Commission approached Jack as he watched the children. "They're adapting well," she observed. Jack nodded. "They're resilient, more than I would have expected after everything they've been through." "The Commission has received your application," Reyes continued, "for formal fostering rights." Jack's expression remained neutral, but his hands tightened slightly at his sides. "And it's unprecedented," Reyes admitted. "Human fostering of non-human refugee children. There's no protocol for it." "There's always a first," Jack replied quietly. Reyes smiled. "Which is exactly what I told the Commission. Your application has been provisionally approved, pending a 6-month observation period." Relief washed over Jack. He had known it was a long shot. Interspecies adoption had never been officially sanctioned, though informal arrangements existed in some border colonies. But he had been unwilling to abandon Eli and Kira to the system, even one as well-intentioned as the Refugee Commission. "Thank you," he said simply. "Don't thank me," Reyes responded. "Your actions aboard that vessel spoke louder than any character reference I could have provided. You nearly died saving those children. The Commission recognizes that kind of commitment." Jack watched as Eli showed Kira how to weave alien wildflowers into a crown. The older child was still recovering her strength after the long cryosuspension, but her natural grace was evident even in simple movements. "They saved me too," Jack said softly. "In more ways than one." Reyes seemed to understand. She nodded and departed, leaving Jack to his thoughts and his charges. That evening, in the small 3-room dwelling assigned to them, Jack read a bedtime story. It was an old Earth tale, translated into simple standard that the children could follow. The story of a knight who rescued a princess from a dragon, sacrificing his shield to protect her from flames. Eli and Kira listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions about unfamiliar Earth concepts. Jack explained patiently, enjoying their curiosity and fresh perspective. As the children drifted toward sleep, Jack watched over them. Eli's natural luminescence dimmed slightly as she relaxed, casting a gentle blue glow across the room. Kira hummed a melody from her homeworld, the sound hauntingly beautiful. In the quiet moments between wakefulness and dreams, Jack made a silent promise to protect these children, to give them a home and family, to ensure they never again experienced the fear and loss that had marked their young lives. A promise he had once made to himself after Tarsus, transformed now into a commitment to two specific lives. No longer an abstract ideal, but a concrete reality with glowing eyes and curious questions. "If there's breath, we must try," he whispered, his personal mantra taking on new meaning in this unexpected family he had found among the stars. Eli stirred slightly, her eyes opening to fix on Jack's face. "Story. Again. Tomorrow?" she asked sleepily. Jack smiled. "Yes, another story tomorrow, and many more after that." Satisfied, the child closed her eyes and slipped into peaceful slumber. Jack remained in the doorway, watching over his charges long after they had fallen asleep. Outside the window, the stars of a distant galaxy shimmered. Somewhere among them, the remains of a destroyed vessel drifted in the cosmic currents. A graveyard for many, but also the birthplace of something new, a family forged in crisis, bound by sacrifice, and sustained by the simplest and most powerful force in any universe: compassion. Jack Renaer, former starfighter ace turned rescue specialist, had finally found what he had been searching for across countless missions. Not redemption for those he couldn't save, but purpose in those he could. And in the peaceful breathing of two alien children, who now called him family, he found a reason to continue that purpose for all the days to come.